Thanks for joining us on Building Australia today. I'm joined by Luke Plowman from Detail Green, and Detail Green are the sponsors of today's show. Let's get into it. So, Luke, tell us a little bit about your career to date. How did you get into this space in the building industry?
Yeah, sure. I originally trained as a structural engineer,
Right.
but I never worked as one. I worked in construction and project management for Lend-Lease for quite a while.
Okay.
And I was actually involved in a building at Melbourne Docklands, one of the first green buildings that were built down there. And this is, early 2000s, so before Green Star even existed. And that really got my interest in this sort of energy efficient light field building that we were working on. And so eventually, when that project finished, I quit my job and I went and did a master's in sustainability.
Which is 4 or 5 years of...
No, it was 1 year, a coursework master's, so which was good, which was something you could fit in amongst your career.
Yep.
And after that, I started working as an ESD consultant, and I was working for a big consulting company. And I had a colleague who was from the UK, and he mentioned this standard, the passive house standard, which I'd never heard of before. And so I got quite interested about these buildings you could heat with a hairdryer and super airtight and just super comfortable. I thought, oh, this sounds great. And this was around about the time that the Australian Passive House Association started up.
Well, what year was this, Luke?
2013, 2012, 2013.
Okay. Yeah, 12 years ago.
Yeah,
Yep.
so quite a while ago now. And I ended up doing the first Passive House designer training that was held in Australia.
Yep.
And from there I was in and hooked. And I started Detail
Usually
Green.
what happens?
Yeah, it is. I started Detail Green on the side from working with my the other company that I was working for. And it grew and grew. And eventually, I went out on my own, and it's really grown since there. In 2016, I was asked, I guess, the number of passive house buildings in Australia. There'd been a few, and they'd been certified typically by the Passive House Institute in Germany.
Which was quite a process too, wasn't it? Because a lot of documentation had to make its way back to Germany to do that.
And the buildings that they build there are really different to the way that we build here. And so there's a bit of this sort of lost in translation stuff.
Yeah.
And I got called by a colleague in New Zealand and said, do you want to do the certifiers course? Because we need some local certifiers.
Yeah.
So in 2016, I went to Germany and did the certifier training there with Claire Parry and also with Jason Quinn from New Zealand. So
how long does that take?
The course was 2 weeks at the Passive House Institute itself.
Yep.
And then you have, like most training things, you have a probation period after that.
Sure.
So you're always supported by the institute, but until you find your feet, you've got that support there. So that was 2016, and I did a count the other day between myself and my colleague Amelia. We've certified 84 buildings in Australia now.
Wow. And where are most of those? Which dates?
So the number of projects has really escalated. So it's probably fairly exponential increase.
Yeah.
In terms of the number of buildings that have been completed. We're just sort of getting through the final end of that sort of COVID backlog of craziness that we've had for the last few years.
And I think the other thing that's happening now, there's a lot of documentation about building when it comes to building a home now, and that just takes longer for people to process as well. So
I think the average project length is 2 to 3 years for us.
Yeah.
So from when we get involved to the certification being issued at the end of when the building's finished. So
which is one of the things I want to discuss today. I mean, what is your role before the build, during the build, and after the build? What can people expect? Because it's obviously a bit of an abstract concept to people. I explain it like having a second building surveyor who's really looking at the thermal performance of the building. So tell us what's involved from start to finish for you.
Yeah, so it's quite a good way to look at it, is we're sort of independent from the design process, and our job is quality assurance, review, and technical support.
Yeah.
So the passive house designer, who can be either a consultant or perhaps the building designer or architect, leads the design process and designs the building to the passive house standard. And they do the modelling, and then we as a certifier check their work.
Yeah.
So, and also if they need help, if it's a tricky climate or a tricky situation, or which thermal bridges do I model, that's where we help.
And there is a lot of help needed. That technical support that you spoke about there is something, even experienced architects, they need a bit of guidance on this. And of course the builders do as well, because ultimately, well, not always, but often we're doing this stuff for the first time. So that technical backup is critical. Yeah,
definitely. So we do an initial review sort of in early stages of detailed design in the working drawings phase, just to check that everything's on track and provide feedback to the design team. And then prior to construction commencing, and this doesn't always occur, but it should, in the ideal process, we do what we call the pre-construction review, where we check all the documents. So as a builder, the documents you get to build the house with, it's got everything documented, everything specified.
Yeah.
And then, as long as I follow this documentation and I
Yeah.
meet my airtightness and commissioning requirements,
Yeah.
this building can be certified.
Yeah, because there are some things that we can't know on site. You can't test as you go. You sort of have to trust in the system.
Yeah.
And then you can really only, some things anyway, you can really only test after living in the building. Airtightness is one thing that's different. We can test that really early on. But in terms of the thermal modelling, we just have to trust in the science and the documentation ultimately.
Yeah, that's right. So at that sort of construction start, the certification process is kind of 3/4, 75, 80% done.
Yep.
Then we hand it over to the design and construction team, or maybe mainly in residential, it's usually just the builder, to collate the evidence. So what we're looking for at the end of the day when the house is finished, one, that it's met its airtightness requirement, but it's also been documented so that we know that that insulation was specified. Here's some photos of it being installed. So all of the thermal envelope in particular is well documented that it's been built as it was designed.
Yeah, so we'll have a number of categories for photographic evidence, such as framing, insulation, services install like HRV, any sort of thermal bridging and anything like that that needs to be seen, that can't be viewed afterwards.
Yep.
We're going to provide evidence of that. And is it true that ultimately this still goes to Germany for final scrutiny?
So as a Passive House certifier, we're an agent, I guess, if you like, of the Passive House Institute. We complete the certification. They do their own in-house QA, but that's more a high-level check. They do also random, more detailed checks.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, no, the process is owned by the certifier, and the institute is there to support us. They do a quick, so each certified building has a unique number. That's its certification ID. When we finish the process, we send our documents off, or it's all an online system.
Sure.
They do a bit of a check, and then they issue us, as long as they're happy with it, they then issue us with the number.
Yeah.
And once that is finished, we can then give you your Passive House certificate and plaque for the project.
And they'll presumably have a record permanently of all this as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all kept.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if it was ever questioned, the evidence is there that the building is certified.
So your final steps after the project's finished, would you always need to go out on site?
No, not always. I mean, I'd like to, because going outside is way better than being in the office. So I'd like to try and do that. But we're working on projects all over the country, so
it's not always practical.
It's not always practical, and particularly in a single-family house where that extra cost would probably put a lot of people off. So in most projects we rely on the photos from the build team to demonstrate how it's been built.
And it is a consideration because there is an extra investment in going down this path. I suggest to people that I think the return on this will be over a number of years. I think it's only a matter of time before banks and insurers start to recognise the Passive House standard and give better rates for insurance policies, better terms for bank finance. So the benefits there in the medium to long term. So it's not something you're going to get straight away. It's not a stone bench top. It's not a shiny tap. It's there for the long term, and it's built in as an investment into the home.
Yeah, and I think the one thing you do notice, and you would have seen this, is that when you walk into a passive house, the presence and the thermal comfort is, that seeing is believing, I reckon, is the real key to, more uptake of the standard, and also people really understanding what they've just invested in. Yeah. It's like no other house you've been in. Yeah. That's a real seeing is believing.
And feeling
is believing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we almost need a couple of model houses where people can go and stay for a couple of nights and experience it, because it's not until you've lived it and you realise, God, I haven't turned the heater on for days and days, or I haven't turned the air conditioning on, I haven't turned it on yet this summer. Those are things that you can't read about or see in a video or a brochure. They have to be experienced.
Yeah, and that whole thing about my bathroom's the same temperature as the rest of the house, and the laundry. Those rooms that we typically leave as those cold or hot rooms. Yeah. It's all one envelope. It's all the same, even, comfortable temperature, and it's always got fresh air.
Yeah. It's so much more than just about cost of energy. That's the obvious one. That's where people are going to want to see that return on investment. That's important to acknowledge. But in terms of the comfort and the health of the home, I reckon the far bigger benefits.
Yeah.
But harder to explain.
Totally. Yeah. That's definitely the challenge, and I think with the Passive House Open Days locally and the international ones, I think are a great tool for people to go and see and get a sense of what one's really like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So tell me, Luke, at the moment, people are familiar with the NATHA system or more commonly the star rating system.
Yep.
How does it compare to that?
Yeah. So passive house is, I guess, is completely separate, and the way the two ratings, like a passive house compliant building or a NATA 7-star, which is the building code minimum, they're calculated really differently.
Yep.
So you use different software, and unfortunately at the moment there's not much overlap between them. So in most projects you end up having to do both.
Which is a shame because we know one's more effective, but it's just not recognised yet.
Yes. So in New South Wales, under the basic scheme, in 2/3 of the state, you can use passive house as an alternative to NatHERS now. There was some comparative studies done and proved that passive house was beyond 7 stars in all of those New South Wales climates.
Yeah.
So it's a very different assumptions in the model. What we've seen when we do projects, because we do NatHERS assessments as well, is that in Victoria particularly, or anywhere cool, Canberra, Southern Highlands, New South Wales, a passive house will get at least 8 stars typically. There are quirks to the NatHERS software, but yeah, typically you'll be at least 8 stars. But in Sydney and really mild coastal areas, it's actually very similar.
Yeah.
So the insulation you need on coastal New South Wales for a passive house is about the same for
a standard house.
A standard house.
Yeah.
But you don't have, a standard house doesn't have the air tightness or the being
Yeah.
thermal breach free, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
so they're different tools. Passive house is a lot more in depth, so it takes a lot more time to build a passive house model, but it's a lot more accurate. The results, it's been tested as pretty spot on.
But also it's having, going back to the previous topic, it's having that due diligence, that testing and that checking, whereas currently no one's checking the quality of the insulation, no one's checking the details of the window installs. That's just not being done. So all that, how that's actually being carried out, there's no checks and balances there. So, and it does get missed, sadly. You hear these stories of half the roof wasn't insulated, and so I think that's the big difference, is like you've got someone physically checking all this sort of stuff. So it's a different level. But when it does get adopted by the regulators, I think is when it will become, it'll be adopted widely by consumers as well, because they will just be guided by the regulators, I think.
Yeah. That seems the way, a lot of the market goes. A lot of the space that we work in is that the higher end of the market, where people are interested and can go that little bit extra upfront capital cost to get a way better outcome at the end of the day.
Yeah, so it may be that in the volume building world, for example, they're not likely to adopt full passive house, but they will lift the standards substantially.
Yeah, and we're starting to see that now, actually, with a number of volume builders or even regional builders who build lots of houses, having clients who want a high performance house, and they're going, coming to us and we're doing at least giving them some guidance, and it's great to see those step ups happening. And then once those, in an estate, someone's got a really awesome house, and then there's the usual talk that, this house, have you been to this person's house? It's awesome.
Yeah, word of mouth.
Word of mouth. As we saw with, the commercial green buildings and the growth of Green Star, was all about word of mouth from the people who worked in those buildings going, this building's awesome.
It's just comfortable.
Yeah, and it exploded, and now Green Star is the standard for any office building in the country. So so that's, hopefully that's the path we're on with passive house.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the volume world, it will be a bit of a competitive advantage for one builder to do this, and others will follow. That's just the nature of it, isn't it?
Yeah, yep.
So in terms of the investment right now for an energy efficient home, is there any data around the return on investment? Because it's certainly a question I get asked all the time. It's like, well, how long's the payback period? They've heard about this with solar panels and all these other gadgets. It's a hard question to answer. Is there any data out there at the moment?
There was a study that done recently by Domain on selling values of energy efficient houses compared to minimum practice.
Yep.
And that showed, I think, so it's not specific to passive house, just either a house with a higher star rating. They were getting at 14% was across the country average extra. So 2 comparable houses, one's minimum practice, one's a high performance, 14%. So that, in terms of resale, is a really positive sign.
Yeah.
And typically, a passive house compared to a standard building is anywhere between 50 and 90% more energy efficient on the heating and cooling side of things.
Sure. Yeah.
And what you also get is that vastly improved thermal comfort and improved indoor air quality. So those are the really intangibles that you can't put a number on.
Yeah.
But there's definitely good operational cost savings, and also that, what we're starting to see now is that resale price being significantly better than a standard build.
Yeah, and it's not why you build a house. You don't build it to sell it. You build it. You hope to live in it for 30 or 40 years. And I think ideally pass it on to the kids as well, because
Yeah.
owning a home is getting harder for people. So to have a house that's durable and lasts 100 years, we used to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty important thing to be striving for as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. One of the questions that also comes up, and I asked other people like Joel and a few other people in the passive house world, wood heaters. What are your thoughts? I get asked a lot. It's a very romantic notion, having the wood heater. Clashes a bit with passive house and air tightness. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it can be done. Generally, what we find in Australia, even in cool parts like Victoria and Tassie and stuff, if you get a full certified passive house, you can put a fireplace in, it's fine, but you're very rarely going to use it.
Yeah.
So in terms of value for money, not a great investment. A couple of minimum things you need to do if you're going to put a wood fire in a passive house. It's got to be room sealed, so with a door.
Yeah.
It's also got to have its own dedicated air supply. So it's not drawing room air from the room.
Yeah.
Because in an airtight house, it's not going to be able to get air that it needs.
Yeah.
And you've also got to have carbon monoxide sensor, which is pretty good practice for anyone with a wood fire, really.
Yeah. I mean, those things nowadays are also pretty cheap. There's a couple of CO2 sensors and like the particulate matter readings that you can buy. I think there's one at IKEA which I've got, which is pretty accurate.
Yeah.
And now that I've started to use it, I've become aware of when our levels are up and down, and I'm constantly checking the temperature now.
Yeah.
I don't want to live like that, but in the early stages, since we've completed renovation, it's nice to know what's working.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of wood fires, what we suggest to a lot of people who are really keen on it is an outdoor fire, a fire pit or something outside. Yeah. You can enjoy that, lighting a fire, having a fire. We all love it, it's great.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's better outside the house. You might actually use it more than the one inside the house.
Yeah, especially if it's undercover, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's a bit like using the makeup air systems with range hoods in your kitchens. It just gets a little bit more complex. You've got more ventilation to consider and more air tightness. So yes, it can be done. No, it's not needed, but it's a bit complex.
Yeah. And therefore it's going to add a bit of cost.
Yeah.
And you don't need a very big one. Of the few projects that do have that we know, the fire very quickly overheats the room that it's in a passive house because it's so thermally efficient.
Yeah.
So you'd have to put in a little tiny one too.
You'd be opening windows.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's a common occurrence. So doable, but generally not recommended.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly doable if you want to.
I think your idea, put on the outside, I think it ticks all the boxes, especially if you've got a nice view. Yeah, take it outside.
Yep.
So as far as the actual certification process, what's the most important part, do you think?
For us, I think the key is getting that pre-construction review done. So getting it all documented and reviewed and everybody's on the same page before you start construction.
Yep.
That way that you as the builder can be confident that as long as I follow these documents, we're good. The owner and the designer going, yep, we've done all this complicated work. We want to be comfortable that it's right. And from my perspective, the worst thing to do is say, sorry, we can't certify this building because, you've got...
Going back 2 years ago, we didn't,
Yeah. So that's the most important thing is to get it all reviewed before you start building.
There's still documentation.
Yeah.
It always comes back to that, doesn't it?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, and it does put me off a little bit sometimes when I see a set of drawings and there's 10 pages. You just know there's something missing. There's more to the story that you just don't know. It's not written down yet.
Yeah. So I guess that in that pre-construction phase, we're looking to see that all the junctions are detailed, and we can see that there's the thinking behind the airtightness it's been thought through. It's not like, we're going to chuck an airtight membrane into a standard build.
Yeah.
Because from a buildability perspective, you've got to make sure you can make that airtight layer continuous.
Yeah, it does require a little bit of imagination as well to visualize how a wrap is going to go over a timber frame and where it's going to meet something in junctions.
Yep.
It does require a bit of visualization, and doing that the first time for anyone, for a builder or a designer or a homeowner, it's hard.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
So really then the certifier needs to get on board almost at the start or after concepts, or because what we find is people are often going to town planning.
Yep.
That's big stage one.
Yeah.
So where should the certifier fit into this process?
Somewhere around there. I think if you're in an urban area and you need to go for planning and you've got perhaps overlooking issues, or once you get your planning permit, it's locked in stone and you can't change the building. Ideally, we want to do our first review before you submit for planning.
Yeah.
That way, if there's been an error in the PHPP calculations and the building's overheating, you need to add more shading, or you need to change a window, or it's not quite meeting the heating and you want to put more windows in.
Yeah.
All that stuff, once you've got a planning permit in an urban site, is
Yeah.
difficult and time consuming
Yep.
to do. So in those situations, definitely, prior to planning, just to get that first review done, make sure everyone's, we're on the right track.
Yeah.
So you don't need
Particularly
the details.
windows.
Yeah, particularly windows, all those overlooking issues and shadowing and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
For projects in more regional areas, that's less critical because even if you may need a planning permit for a bushfire reason, for instance, if we do the review and you need more windows or whatever, if you're on an acre block or bigger, there's no overlooking issues. So that's not a problem with making that amendment.
Yep.
But generally earlier is better. And what we normally say is once the passive house designer has done a preliminary passive house model and they think it's, they've got it passing, then we check that to make sure it's, it's a quicker check, but we just make sure that it's correct and they can then proceed with commencing detailed design knowing that they're on the right track.
Yeah, there'll be some minor tweaks and adjustments, but the vast majority of it is okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So when it comes to shading, we can use mechanical shading, but the PHPP also allows for natural shading, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah, so we model, the 3D model for the house will include surrounding trees, buildings, fences, all that kind of other structures, and the implications of that shading is taken into account. One of the things we really find is, a passive house ideally follows passive solar principles, but we're taking it to the next level. So, getting the orientation, northern orientation,
and that's
is key. Get that right,
and
you'll get an efficient way to get to passive house, minimum extra cost. One interesting thing we see is, typically passive solar designs use eaves to do a lot of the shading.
Yep.
Passive houses, because they're so airtight, are prone to overheating more quickly, particularly even from bounced radiation off your paving, off the deck, off the paving, off something out the front. So we see more commonly external blinds used, particularly east and west windows because they're really hard to shade.
Keep the glass cool.
Yeah, keep the car. And if external shading is vastly more efficient or effective than internal shading. So
and it's permanent.
Yeah, it's permanent. Yeah, that's it. And it doesn't have to be blinds. It can be screens and other bits and pieces, or it can be deciduous planting as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, you need to. Shading is important to get right.
Yeah, because there is a case also where we've anticipated a bit of shading from trees, and trees for whatever reason have perhaps died or been cut down, so that effect has sort of been lost. So.
Yeah, it is something to.
Do they put as much weight on that shading effect, or is it?
Yeah, the building will be certified as the site stands when it's finished. But our guidance always is if you're going to plant a bunch of big trees, that do a model, save as your model, and put in the trees in when they're fully grown and see what they look like.
Yep.
Also, if you've got a house, same in Natters, it's the same actually. If you've got a new development, you're building a new house, and there's nothing around you, then you must model adjacent buildings to see the impact of that shading. So, it's sensible and it takes existing conditions. And as you're right, if you're planning to plant a deciduous vine on a pergola, but you never get round to it, the certification is not reliant on that.
Yeah, which is good because it means you can still go back to mechanical screens as well. And the thing I love about this, because I've transitioned from at home now to putting external blinds. The internal used to sort of do two things, didn't they? They were sort of privacy, and they're trying to block out a bit of heat. But since moving them all outside, not that we really need privacy so much, but we'd still get that. That's a tick. But by keeping that heat off the glass is just vastly more effective.
Yep, massively.
Yeah. So in terms of effectiveness, what do you think is the most successful approach, whether it's a style of construction or documentation or even building a team of people to bring it all together? What have you seen in your experience that's been the most successful?
Definitely the team, I think, is key. So the most successful projects we see are where the designer or passive house consultant, if there's a separate consultant, and the builder, everyone gets together and it's more a negotiated final price than going out to tender. And that comes back to what we talked about before, the buildability issues and the sequencing of construction, particularly if it's a tight site or urban where access is difficult. Or if the builder is not that experienced, then the passive house designer can help educate the builder so he doesn't price in a big safety factor that he probably doesn't need. So there's that education through the team and also that collaboration, because quite often, and I see this a lot, is that you can design a nice building, but if your designer doesn't think through construction sequencing,
Yeah.
when the builders come on board, it's like, oh, actually, we can't build that because, the sequencing doesn't work. So
Yeah.
that collaboration has always been, in the 10 years we've been doing it, by far the most effective approach.
And the sequencing is one of those things that, again, it's an abstract concept to a lot of people. Builders are familiar with it because we have an order of doing things. We know
Yeah.
it works. And with Passive House, we don't change it from end to end. It's not visually changed, but right in the middle there, it is a jumble. And I find each project's sufficiently different that the sequence has to be different as well.
Yeah.
So it's not like we can say, yeah, we change our sequence and this will work on every Passive House project. It's like we sort of have to look at that sequence for this project.
Yeah.
And that's something that not everyone wants to give it that amount of time. And yes, we can learn a little bit on site, but I think the less we learn on site, the better.
Yeah. Particularly when you've got such a stringent air tightness target. If you're aiming for Passive House certification, you've got to get that 0.6 air changes.
Yeah.
As it's a couple of business cards worth of air leakage in the whole house.
And it's cooked.
That's not much.
Yeah.
So you've got to be spot on.
So the big question we started with on today's video, to certify or to not certify, obviously you've done an immense amount of training, you've got a career's worth of experience to say you should certify. Nevertheless, some people, for various reasons, they won't, but I like to think that even if they don't and they are working to the Passive House standard, they'll get a higher quality home that's comfortable and more durable. If someone's not going to certify, what should they be looking out for?
Yeah, this is a really interesting space, and I completely understand that certified Passive House is not for everyone. There are certain risks with throwing some air tightness membrane and some more insulation at a house. So it needs to be thought through. And I think if you're not going to go for a certified building, having an either experienced Passive House designer or someone who's built an airtight high performance house before on the team is really critical. You need at least one. Like having an inexperienced designer and an inexperienced builder is very risky from from what we've seen. So certainly, I would say perhaps get a preliminary Passive House model done, which is not that expensive, just to guide the design so you're sitting within the benchmarks if you follow this. And then an experienced builder or someone who's done it before is a lower risk approach to achieving a high performance house. And there's a few things that must go together. So if you're going to build airtight, you must ventilate it. So having that heat recovery, ventilation, and air tightness, two things. Don't do one, not the other.
That's kind of the ultimate non-negotiable. I think if you're talking air tightness, but you don't want to talk about HRV, you don't want to spend that money, stop. Don't proceed, because you're just going to build a sweat box. It's going to be a problem for everyone. That's maybe there's others, but for me, I think that's the ultimate non-negotiable. If you're not doing that, I mean, when it comes to an experienced builder, I got to put my hand up and say, when I did my first one, I wasn't experienced. Had to learn a lot on the way. I was fortunate. I had great architects working with us and clients who were really on board with the Passive House ethos and were supportive of me. Really helped. It's not always going to be that way, but I still think even if the builder's not experienced, it's an opportunity for someone to gain that experience. It's the only way we're going to lift the standard. So it shouldn't put anyone off, but there's lots of extra meetings instead, I think. Strategy meetings and contingencies potentially in the budget to say, well, okay, well, we don't know yet, so let's have some scope in the budget to change the cost during the build. That's mainly around labour too, I think.
And I guess the other thing here is that there's a real performance gap that we see in NatHERS buildings. It can look great on paper, 7, 8 stars, but if the quality control during construction is not there, this is not talking air tightness or ventilation or super high performance windows, just implementation. And I think the real issue we have with our system is that the building surveyor is not really there to check the quality of the insulation installed. They'll check that there is insulation there.
They might.
So this is where Passive House adds value, is that you've got to check it all along the way. So a good quality build of a standard design can still perform quite well, but Passive House adds that extra level of quality assurance through the process. So
and it would be enough to add in, another 3 or 4 inspections during the build to achieve all that. But also right now, there's a lot of talk around the cost of building a house. It's continuing to go up. So it's a sensitive topic to say, okay, well, the only way to do it is to spend more money. That's a sensitive topic. So, but I think the NCC will catch up with these things, they'll recognise the PHPP. Maybe that'll replace the current system completely. So when that happens, I think we'll only see the standards lifting. Prefab is also going to end up lifting those standards as well. So the future is bright. It's not doom and gloom. The life expectancy of these homes just gets better and better.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, there you go. That about wraps it up for today on Building Australia. Thank you so much for joining us, Luke.
No worries.
We'll see you on the next episode where we're going to be talking to Dan from ProClimber about all things building wraps. So hope to see you there, and thanks for joining us.